Israel Update with Gadi and Mike Duran. Hello and welcome to an irregular and short episode of Israel Update that we're doing on the fly because Mike is here in Tel Aviv at the end of an Israeli visit. How was your visit, Mike?
Fantastic. Really great.
So you'll tell us a little bit about what you learned in that visit, and we can update our viewers about the most recent scandal.
Why don't we start with that? Because the Prime Minister issued this statement a couple of days ago, which was amazing, where he basically vindicated, I think, your analysis of what's been going on.
And the whole press went, the Prime Minister again is attacking the army in the middle of a war. But what the Prime Minister said is that there's an investigation of one of the it's not exactly an aide, but someone who was working with his office, including, by the way, now investigations to other people in his office, including a close aide. And he basically said that this was a political op. Although these were not his words, he said, why are all the other leaks not investigated? There are much worse and much higher up leaks. He said there were leaks from the cabinet, even leaks from the war cabinet, which was at one point down to 4 or 5 people. So, and these leaks he asked to be investigated, and they were not investigated. And he said, why were they not investigated? Because they were leaks against me. And this leak, he insinuated, is not against me. And suddenly, it is investigated. So there,
and not just investigated. I mean, the guy's been thrown in a dungeon and basically put in solitary confinement and made to feel like his life is about to end.
And they've been trying to break him. And this is also a Shabak, not a police investigation. There are various differences. In the United States, you have the FBI, which does both law enforcement and counterintelligence. But counterintelligence in Israel is done by the Shabak, and it's a completely different procedure. They have free hands to interrogate in ways that the police cannot, and also the interrogations are not documented. Police interrogations are supposed to be documented verbatim. Shabak interrogations are just summed up by the interrogator.
Wow.
And now, according to what
did not know that.
According to what the Prime Minister said, Shabak has been insubordinate. He has been telling Shabak to investigate these leaks, and they haven't. So the other important thing he said, except that this was a case of achifa bareranit.
But what do you call it? Enforcement of no?
No, achifa bareranit is unequal enforcement. You have a term for that.
We should take a little step back here, and just for those people who aren't following this closely, when you're saying that the Prime Minister said some leaks have not been investigated but this leak is being investigated, we should explain what kind of leaks have not been investigated. Just sort of give us a couple of details.
He gave a few examples.
Well, why don't you give us a couple?
One example is, for instance, he was insisting on the Philadelphia corridor, as we said on our show often. So whenever there was a hostage deal on the table, the parameters of the Israeli position to negotiation was that we're not going to give up the Philadelphia corridor, which is the border with Gaza and with Egypt, and a way to seal Gaza off. And as this progressed, the Prime Minister managed to get Blinken and the Americans in general on board with this, to present a unified front to Hamas in order to achieve, in order to get what Israel wants. And there were people within the cabinet who were saying that we can do without the Philadelphia corridor.
And they were leaking
and not only that,
that were going on.
They were also leaking that, thus undermining Israel's position. This is serious harm, because if you are Hamas and you know that someone in the cabinet is undermining the Prime Minister, why don't you would sit back.
The leak against the Prime Minister was a leak that reinforced the argument that his position was preventing a ceasefire and the liberation of the hostages.
Exactly. So this was, in this sense, it was politically useful for his enemies in the campaign against him, which in Israel is ongoing, blaming him for not returning the hostages. So if you walk around Tel Aviv, you will see a sign saying "Bring them home." It's not like "Let my people go," right? "Let my people go" was directed against the Soviet Union. "Bring them home" is not directed at Hamas. It's not "Let them go." It's you are responsible, and you are the reason they are not here because they are trying to hurt.
So it's all to reinforce the claim that there is a deal out there to be had with Hamas, but the insistence of Netanyahu on position X or on position Y is what's keeping the hostages from being free. And then the guy who's in jail, who's in solitary confinement or was in solitary confinement, is Eli Feldstein, and the document that he leaked said what?
The document that he leaked said that Hamas was believed that it was profiting from the infighting in Israel and therefore hardened its own views.
But that was a document from Hamas itself.
It was a document from Hamas.
So Hamas in its own words was saying that all of the infighting among the Israelis was strengthening their position and therefore didn't require them to make concessions.
Yeah, Hamas was basically saying that the people who were leaking were also helping Hamas.
Right.
So that was not investigated, but then the document leaked reinforced Netanyahu's position, and now they began to investigate. But here's the other thing he said in this video, which is extremely important. He said, "I did not hear of this document until I read about it in the press." So he said in that little 9-minute speech that he released, he said, I have to take decisions. And basically the intelligence, he didn't say exactly who, are withholding documents from me that are necessary for decisions. And then you see the whole picture, because this guy, Eli Feldstein, and another person we're not allowed to know the name of, they are now accused of operating against the interests of the state of Israel. But this is what they did is they came to their superiors and they said to them, "These are documents you should show the prime minister." And they said no. And they withheld
superiors
them
blocked the information from
reaching the prime minister. And so these patriotic officers just bypassed their command in order to bring documents to the prime minister that they thought it was necessary of them to see.
So there's two separate issues here. Then one is officers bypassing the normal channels,
which is a disciplinary problem.
Disciplinary, but in order that the prime minister will get information, and another one is someone leaking a document
and holding it without permission,
and holding it without permission, which strengthens. Leaked a document that strengthened the prime minister's political claim, or strengthened the prime minister's political standing, right, against those who were leaking against it.
So this is.
I hope this has been clear.
This is.
You feel like
a loop on a loop.
I'm just trying to be the advocate of the viewers here, because
I'll give you another way to look at it simply. These people have been withholding information from the prime minister for a very long time.
These people being the leaders of
the heads of the intelligence community and the IDF and Shabak. What is October 7th? They had information that an attack may be imminent on the night between the 6th and 7th of October. When was the first time Netanyahu knew about it?
6:29.
6:29. They did not wake up Netanyahu. They took the major decisions without him. So they were withholding information back then. Now the people who were withholding information have been discovered to withhold more information. But Mike, the Israelis basically know that. The novelty is that Netanyahu,
he's saying it now openly.
He's saying it openly. And this is a direct accusation against the people that he is commanding for the running of the war.
There's another wrinkle in, or another little chapter in all this. a few weeks ago? I can't remember, a few months, maybe a month ago, there was another mini scandal that disappeared where one of his aides was said to have amended the protocols so that his, if I have it correctly, his military advisor, when information comes in, they keep a log of the calls. And there was a log of the calls that said that the first call to Netanyahu came at 6:40, and one of his aides,
his chief of
changed
staff,
it. His chief of staff changed it by hand, and wrote no, it's 6:29. And they tried to accuse him
of forging the protocol.
Of forging the protocols, but it was ridiculous in that case because it actually said that Netanyahu got informed a bit earlier than it's in his political interest to
say
as
late as
possible. So it was clearly just the guy was really just amending it so that it was correct.
But if you take the long view for a minute, what you will see is that they are sticking their hands into his staff and office, and this creates a paranoid atmosphere inside the office. And I know from the grapevine, I'm not sure how true it is, but that people in and around Netanyahu are talking about what each should do if they are suddenly taken into custody.
It's got to be scary.
One of them, Jonathan Urich, who's a very close aide, had his telephone confiscated by, I don't know if Shabak or police, but they took his telephone. That's a very radical thing to do when this is.
And Shabak has Pegasus, right? I mean,
they can penetrate. They can penetrate everything. But look, it's a very delicate situation because think Russian collusion. Netanyahu is in charge of the Shabak, and Shabak is now investigating his aides, not yet him. But if they declare that the investigation is now against Netanyahu, then you have the James Comey, Robert Mueller situation, in which you can create an investigation that would paralyze the prime minister from controlling the arms that he needs to run the war. And so when Netanyahu is saying outright that his underlings have been concealing information for him, he is taking the fight into the open. And I think that if you consider it politically, he's doing the right thing, because they would have the upper hand if all this is done clandestinely. And the next time they could have done it in a way, if they were, I don't know, if they were malicious enough and nimble enough, they would have done it in such a way that they can get a gag order and say, Netanyahu's under investigation. We can't tell you what, but he can't run the Shabak anymore.
Right. So I've heard this from a number of people on the political right here, that where they see this headed. This sounds a bit extreme to me, to be honest with you, but the argument is that this is headed toward an incapacitation argument, that he's effectively incapacitated by the investigation and therefore he has to leave office. Right? I can't see how they can do that.
I think you're right.
But I've been wrong on this particular scandal. I'm totally convinced now after talking to people here that it is pretty much exactly as you're describing it, and it's amazing. I mean, it's really Shakespearean that in the middle of this war, which in my view is really an existential war, elements of the establishment are trying to undermine the prime minister. And they've never, the most amazing thing is that I think we know pretty clearly now that Hamas was never on the verge of cutting a deal with Israel.
And the Americans are saying it.
The Americans are admitting it.
Yeah.
And the Americans pushed the Israelis as much as they could to get to a point where they thought they would likely have a deal with Hamas, but they never got Hamas to say yes. And Hamas now is very far from saying yes.
So, but as for incapacitation, I think that some people have such an idea, but I think it would be suicidal on their part. And let me give you.
Because he's so popular in the polls now.
Yeah,
And he's been leading the war to success, and to take down the prime minister on these what are, I think, transparently bogus claims. When he's
going to be very hard.
Would be politically impossible.
I think the Attorney General's office understands this, and the state attorney had issued, which is very rare, an explanation, an FAQ about why we arrested
Eli
Mr.
Feldstein and threw him in
the
a
other
dungeon.
guy. Yeah, and if you read it, you understand how oblivious they are to what is really bothering the public, although they tried to make an FAQ, which is all questions and answers. And there they say...
I didn't see that. I'd like to see that document.
It was posted on Amit's... You should make a summary for English speakers.
Yeah, why don't we put it in a link to it in the comments? I've actually, the funny thing for me being here while I've been here is that I have barely had an opportunity to read the news. Going around talking to everyone about the news, I'm actually less on top of all the...
But you don't get it through the filtered conversations? The actual news information.
What are you talking about? Oh, yeah, but I don't. But I like to actually see what everybody's reading and saying and so on. And I don't have time to read my phone.
So
I'm spending too much time talking to people.
So, which is easy in Israel.
Yeah.
Israelis are talkative. So they published this document, and strangely, in the first paragraph of the document, they say that Eli Feldstein and the other guy, whose name we can't mention, have created a bypassing channel for information around those authorities in the army which screen information for the prime minister. They're basically admitting the basic facts while hiding behind,
they're screening information from the prime minister.
Now, of course, there's always screening, right? You know, you work in the Pentagon, you went in the White House. You can't just dump on the prime minister all the raw information. But this is
what I heard. I was watching a debate on Channel 12, and the Channel 12 being the mainstream channel that's not sympathetic to the prime minister, and one of the debaters said just that. His response to all this was, what you're saying, basically there should just be a huge fire hose at the prime minister, and all this garbage should be thrown at him, and this doesn't. You can't run a state that way. But of course, the document that was held from the prime minister was not
a document confirming his stance against the people
in Hamas,
who are hiding.
In Sinwar's own voice. I mean, this is not.
But not just this. It confirmed the opinion of the prime minister against those who were withholding the document.
Yeah.
So they were clearly self-interested. Now the public generally follows this, and since Netanyahu took it out of the open, they will have a much harder time, and this is why. Generally, the political junta, the judicial junta, which means the attorney general, which is very
whose
powerful,
name I can never say,
Gadi Ba'arav Miara, and she's both the legal counsel to the government and the attorney general. It's a very powerful position in Israel. It's more powerful than anywhere else. Then there's the all-powerful Supreme Court, and then their allies in the army and Shabak and elsewhere. And once Netanyahu takes it out to the open, they will find it harder to try a judo a judo exercise, a judo.
Yeah,
But no, I have to finish this point because they usually operate without accountability. So they're used to doing things just with blunt force, just because they can. They can take your phone and there's nothing you can do. And they usually don't understand the limits to their own power because they don't understand their power rests on legitimacy. So the court is actually smarter than some of these guys. And I'll give you an example of how the court can be politically smart.
Can I interrupt you for one moment?
Why in the middle of the story, though?
Because I think I know where you're going, and I think we should remind everyone at this point, because the system is so different than it is in the United States, that in every bureaucracy there is a legal advisor. And the legal advisor is supposed to be in theory, is the representative of the department to the legal establishment. But what they actually become is the representative of the legal establishment to the department and they will actually they actually intervene. Those legal advisors actually intervene in department policy making and overrule the people running the departments.
Intervene is not a strong enough word. They can veto policy. People don't understand how crazy the system is.
And this is without ever going to the court. They already reflect the opinion of the court.
Yeah. So the crazy result of this is that the legal advisors have a veto, the power of a veto over policy of the elected ministers. So the whole system.
It's like there's like a legal umbrella over the entire political system.
Yeah, and they call it judicial independence.
Judicial independence. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just wanted that picture to be clear in everyone's head.
So the court at one point, the court is very strongly tilted to the left, and of course, taking down Netanyahu is the dream, the goal of the whole left. And then they had a chance. They had a chance because Netanyahu was indicted, and the basic law. The executive says that a prime minister can run the country under indictment until he is convicted in the last court of appeal. But they said it doesn't say that he can construct a coalition. It says he can continue, but not that he can start a coalition. And so the left saw here a great opportunity to take down Netanyahu, and while he was assembling a coalition. And this arrived to the court. And the court, there were 11 judges, unanimously decided that he can. This was an outrageous decision because they said this is very typical of the Israeli court. They said the creation of a coalition and the choice of the members of Knesset of who will assemble the coalition is the very heart of our democratic system, and therefore should not be subject to judicial review, except in very rare cases.
So they preserve for themselves the right to do it at all, whenever they want.
Whenever they want.
But just right now, they're not going to.
They're not going to do it now. And why? And so I interviewed Daniel Friedman, who was probably our greatest legal scholar and also former Minister of Justice. And I said, look, this is a decision that they retreated in the end. And he said, you know why? He said, this was after the third round of elections. The third or the second, I think the second round of elections. And if they would have taken Netanyahu down, the next election would have been about what? About the power of the court. And they don't want this to be the main topic of the election.
So they're politically astute, isn't it?
Yeah. So the situation is the same now. Gadi Barav Miara has the cards now set on the table in order to declare that the prime minister is incapacitated. A crazy thing in itself that an attorney general can basically annul the results of an election and fire an elected prime minister, a head of state. So this is an incredible power, but I don't think she can use it. Because if they now dare to use it, and not just against a prime minister, against a successful wartime prime minister who is hailed by the army, then this would be suicidal to them. You heard the story, so I'll tell it again to our viewers, and you can pretend to be surprised. It's Netanyahu visited Ba'ad Echad, which is where they train officers and the IDF. So there's a big ceremony of graduation.
Oh, I saw that on the
web. And he entered there, and a whole crowd of soldiers and families, 5,000 people, were cheering. Were B. We're chanting B. Now, of course, Channel 12 caught someone saying, "Shame on you," and they screen only that. But let me tell you, the people who Netanyahu is now not accusing in a coup yet, but in undermining him, are going to be very careful once it's demonstrably clear that the rank and file of the army are going to be really furious if they try a dirty trick to take down the prime minister. And I think everybody has that in the back of their head. We're not heading for a civil war, but this is always the far horizon. And when the army is clearly on one side, then even if the brass is on the other side, they will have much less boldness and audacity. And so that's the army, and the other side is the electorate. Netanyahu, the news is not reporting this, but Netanyahu is steeply rising in the polls. He is now, according to polls that we on the right trust more, Momo Filber's polls, it's called a firm called Direct Polls, says he's 30 points above Gantz in the question, who's the best fit for prime minister? 30 points, Mike. This is not a margin of error.
By the way, we, and primarily you, but we predicted this when Gantz
left the office.
Just to give ourselves a little credit, when he left the office, you said that he got all the credit for being
under the stretcher.
Yeah. And then now he took himself out from under the stretcher, and so the public opinion hasn't followed him. But it's funny that a politician at that rank and from the military would not understand that is where he got all the credit because he put aside his political ambitions and joined the coalition.
This is because there is a Ben Rhodes-style echo chamber between the American administration and the Israeli press. They're all reinforcing the wishful thinking on both sides. Yeah. And the wish is that Netanyahu would disappear. And then everything will be fine, because then, as we said, a moderate coalition will emerge. But the Israeli public is just behind the one line the prime minister has been touting.
Yeah.
Total victory.
I heard I don't think I quoted it here, because I wanted to be careful, I think. But a few months ago, maybe 6 months ago, I was privy to a conversation that senior people, let's say I overheard, so maybe that's a better way to put it. I overheard a conversation of senior officials in the Biden administration about Netanyahu and the relations with Israel. And they said, he's like a rat in a trap. That was their words for what they were doing to him, and they were continuing to close the walls around him so that he would have less and less places to turn, and eventually he was going to be toppled. If you go back, I think a great moment to date it is when Chuck Schumer came out and called for him to resign.
Yeah, I said one of the 4 obstacles to progress was Netanyahu.
And at the same time that Schumer was calling for that, the U.S. intelligence community put out an assessment that he was more vulnerable than ever before. So they clearly intended that to happen, and now they've failed. When I say they, I mean both the Americans and his opponents here. And this feels like I didn't want to believe this about the leak scandal, but it feels like a last gasp of desperate people, because they can see Trump is coming. They can see that Netanyahu's relationship with Trump is going to be much better than his relationship with Biden. A lot of the tools that the Biden administration has for putting pressure on Netanyahu, whether it's a UN Security Council resolution or an embargo, sanctions and an embargo on weapons and so on, they're all going to disappear. And his opponents here are in a act of desperation here to try to find something.
Yeah, really.
That's the only way I can interpret this. As you know, I mean,
you were resistant to this.
I was resistant. I didn't want to believe. Well, let's just say I wanted to be very careful. Make sure that I was not my analysis was not simply ideological, and that it was backed up by actual evidence. I think now the evidence is overwhelming.
That's the definition of your job on this podcast, is to be that guy
to be the doubter. One of our we don't have time today to read the comments, but one of the people on the of our commenters on the web said that that Israel should listen to me and do the opposite. And I didn't like that comment, but just for the record, I don't think.
To be honest, I don't like that comment too. I think you had a sound policy. You were the one thing that you were wrong. I think the one main thing that you were wrong, along with everybody else, and myself included, was the belief that an attack on Hezbollah would the consequences would be a devastating war. And
I did believe that.
Everybody
Absolutely believe it. Yeah, and well, part of the reason I believe that is that the Israeli military itself believed that. So,
yeah, and I told
they
you,
were pretty good company.
I told you in the midst of this because I was surprised. I can't mention his name. I don't know if he wants to be quoted, but a former general in the IDF, which is a very tough guy, and I meet him often in the Channel 14 studios. I gave him this assessment, and this was after the rockets attack when you said the IDF attacked rockets, but there were not many casualties, so something is wrong here. And so I laid out our interpretation and the general interpretation of what the war would be like with Hezbollah. And he said, "Oh, rubbish." And I said, "How do you know?" He said, "I'm in the." And he explained to me what the modern systems by which the IDF can intercept. And he said, "I sit on these committees, and I'm telling you, it's not going to be as bad as people thought." And I just thought, this is just a tough guy, and he's going to, this is a general pattern. He's going to just head on into the storm. But he was right. Eventually, it turned out that he was right. I'll give you one more example because I think we should at least mention the ICC and the fact that they issued warrants against Netanyahu and Gallant. So first of all,
of course we should mention that. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'm laughing. It's not funny, but also the ICC also doesn't understand Israeli politics because they put Gallant in too. And now what they did is paralyze the left. The left now can't say Netanyahu is our problem. Without Netanyahu, we would not have this. The war would have stopped. The ICC would not bother us and everything else because their hero is there too. But also, this is a chance to see how what John Fonte calls the transnational progressive crowd is acting in tandem with the progressives in each country. Because what the ICC did is it issues these warrants. And it also said that had Israel conducted an investigation, these warrants would not have been necessary.
Right.
Now, the investigation that the Israeli left has been promoting is not a fair investigation. They're trying to have an investigation which would pin down the disaster of October 7 on Netanyahu. And that's not relevant to the ICC, which is accusing us of things that happened after October 7.
Right.
But they are now signaling to the Israeli progressives, push on with your committee of inquiry that can take down Netanyahu, and we're helping you from above with these outrageous.
I think any American watching that should see that this could easily become that this kind of authority allowed unchecked could easily be turned against the United States and against American soldiers. And I agree with Senator Lindsey Graham, who called for sanctions on the ICC, and on the countries
and not alone. Tom Cotton wrote a very stern letter supported by 10 more senators, among them Lindsey Graham and Tom Cruise. And Ted Cruz. Tom Cotton.
Tom Cruise has yet to opine on it.
Yeah, he's busy with Scientology at the moment. So it is indeed a danger to sovereignty of nation states everywhere, and to American servicemen in particular. And this is why
absolutely see it that way.
There is and Israelis now pay attention to the fact that there is an American law that's called the Servicemen Protection Act, I think, but also known by the affectionate name, the Hague Invasion Act, in which...
The what invasion?
The Hague. Oh, the Hague, sorry. So what it says is that the United States will take any action necessary if the court arrests any American servicemen. But this also applies to NATO allies and to non-NATO allies, which are enumerated in the act, including Israel. So basically, Netanyahu himself is protected by this American law if there is a friendly president like Trump. Should Netanyahu be arrested, which I gather, I toyed with the idea that maybe Netanyahu should try them, because the Dutch have declared that they will arrest him. And, if Netanyahu is a conservative person, he doesn't do political drama on a provocative grand scale. But had he been, say, a Harry Truman kind of character, he could have gone to the Netherlands now to dare them. Arrest the Prime Minister of Israel under Trump. you try that. It's in defiance of an American law. And I don't think that the Dutch military is up to a real struggle with the American military.
I hope the Trump administration takes this up, and I hope that it does start to look at the individuals involved and impose sanctions on them and crush this. This is a ridiculous precedent, and the people running this are out of control, unelected, unaccountable, and irresponsible, and probably worse, probably corrupt as well. I don't have evidence of that, but
that's a possibility.
But it's a real possibility.
And the letter that Tom Cotton wrote with these senators actually says we will, if this is adopted as legislation or as a executive order, that the United States will not allow any of these people entry into the United States, and they will chase them and sanction them wherever they are. So if you are sitting on the ICC, your credit card is going to be in danger, and you're going to think
that's exactly what should happen. I shouldn't have said they're corrupt. Do I know they're corrupt? But there are
allegations.
There are allegations. Maybe they are, but what's clearly true is that they are accountable to no one but themselves. They are a power above every elected body. It's outrageous for democracies to be subject to that kind of authority.
Therefore, for me, it's the book that taught me everything about that. Is called Sovereignty or Submission. Will American rules rule themselves or be ruled by others? By our friend John Fonte was also on my Hebrew podcast, and I should have him again because this is an occasion for his theory. Mike, we're out of time, but we want to get at least a minute of your impressions from the visit in Israel. How's Israel doing?
I think Israel is doing extremely well. But I'm looking at the clock, and I have. You'll forgive me. I have somewhere I got to go. So we'll save my impressions to.
Let's do that.
The week after Thanksgiving.
It is a pleasure to have you in the Israel Update studio.
Here in the headquarters.
Here in the headquarters at the heart of Tel Aviv. Thank you very much for appearing in person.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having me. That's what Americans say. And thank you for tuning in. We will be back with a regular episode next week when Mike is safely ensconced at the Hudson sub-headquarters in Washington, D.C. We'll see you soon.